And Stan, tell us a little bit about, I guess we talked about a WordPress update last week,
right.
And I think Jim had talked about that.
What's different this time around? Yep, I guess WordPress is investigated by a lot of researchers because it's actually a high source of vulnerabilities and a lot of web exploits come through.
Well, a lot of websites are using it.
Yeah, well, it's a good place to be then for an exploiter. I think last week we might have talked about 4.1.2, but this time they switched it around. Now it's 4.2.1 is the new version that you should be upgrading to. I think WordPress has this feature that you can have automatic updates, and so if you have that enabled, you should have probably gotten it by now. But if you don't, patching is in order. So what is the vulnerability? It's basically a cross-site scripting vulnerability in the comments field. So somebody could leave a comment that can redirect people to a different website. So visitors to your website would maybe possibly run some sort of JavaScript code or something like that. So that's the usual way of how the cross-site scripting vulnerability works. It's, again, patch. It's just interesting. I did take a look at it from a technical standpoint a little bit more because I'm always interested in how these vulnerabilities present themselves on the internet. Of course, obviously, we usually don't discuss the specific vulnerability that's present. One approach I took is because the source code is available, I just took the previous version of the source code and the new version of the source code to try to gain some understanding into what may have been patched, so I could know what was the problem and possibly know how the exploit might present itself. It's useful for us to know that kind of information for when we're monitoring and security analysis. It's useful to know how exploits might present themselves. So that's the reasoning behind that kind of work.
Yeah, and it's been a busy week for WordPress updates. As you said, last week we talked about version 4.1.2, and then 4.2 was released the following day along with 4.1.3, which I don't even know exactly what was in that one. But this particular cross-site scripting issue, the exploit was released without talking to the WordPress folks because the researcher who discovered the issue complained that he had not heard back anything from the WordPress folks about a similar issue he had reported months ago. So he just released the exploit code, and the following day there was 4.2.1 and 4.1.4 for those who for some reason can't upgrade to 4.2 yet. And so yeah, it's been a really busy week for WordPress updates. So if you manage any WordPress sites, you've probably been getting notices that there was a new version available or a new version applied. The one thing, Stan, though, is the automatic updating of WordPress will not update you from the 4.1 branch to the 4.2 branch. You have to do that yourself.
Oh, that's probably a significant point.
Yeah. So if you are on the 4.1 branch, 4.1.4 it contains the equivalent patch to what's in 4.2.1, but if you go to WordPress.org and look at their release notes and stuff, they're basically saying you need to move to 4.2 relatively soon because they're not going to be backporting a lot of these patches back to the 4.1 branch for very long.
Okay. And I think one of the other things we had talked about last week, just for a little bit of reinforcement, if you're using a cloud service or a hosted service, pay attention to who's responsible for what on that service. This is considered application software, and some only provide basically the patches or the support for the operating system itself. So it's important to pay attention to who's responsible for what. I think, Jim, you had some comments on that yourself.
Yeah. I manage a few sites, and I've got a couple that these patches get applied automatically, and a couple more where I have to do them myself. So yeah, it is something you do need to be aware of and keep track of. And if you're responsible for doing all of the of the WordPress patching, for example, you need to make sure that you're keeping on top of it and checking into your admin dashboard regularly. In the last week, that means daily, to get all the updates.
All right. Well, good.